As a young man, he had a love of both sports and performing, first singing and then dancing. But it was on the stage in the Broadway production of Steambath that fame first found him. Many stage and film roles followed, making him the go-to Hispanic character actor of the 1970s. In the 80s, he cemented a working relationship with director Garry Marshall that continues today. Pretty Woman, Exit to Eden, Runaway Bride, and Princess Diaries are just a few of his notable films. And on television, he has built an equally impressive resume, including Chicago Hope, American Experience, and Monk. Hello, I'm Ernie Manouse. Coming up on InnerVIEWS, our conversation with Emmy Award-winning actor Hector Elizondo. How did your life change meeting Garry Marshall?
After I did my first movie with Garry Marshall, which was Young Doctors in Love in 1980, little did I know that that was the beginning of the door closing on my, pardon the expression, career for playing bad guys.
Yeah.
Because eventually Pretty Woman would come 8 or 9 movies down the road. It's been 16 movies thus far. So it changed that way. It also changed in a variety of other ways. By the way, the playing bad guys, that was a lot of fun. So that was a big change.
Yeah.
After Pretty Woman, I was everyone's mentor for a while. I'm still trying to get away from that a little bit, trying to get into those gray, nuanced areas. I found out that I could play basketball a lot longer than I thought I was going to. He had an ongoing basketball game, a game that went on for, I think, 25, 20, 30 years. And I was invited to his game by someone who had been playing there. Mostly these are over-the-hill people from New York in the industry. Not many actors, producers, writers, and so on. And friends of Garry's, called FOGs, F-O-Gs. They're friends of Garry's. I was never introduced to Mr. Marshall. I was just playing against this tall gentleman, right, who had lots of straps and elbow wrappings, and he was a good basketball player, and he was guarding me. And I whipped a pass behind my back. Unfortunately, the ball hit his mouth. He went down on his knees, and I thought I was in an E.F. Hutton commercial, you know. Do I date myself? Everyone gasped, held their breath, and I said, what's the big deal? It's an accident. It happens all the time. Happens that was Mr. Marshall. They hadn't introduced. It was his court, his home. And he was the host. I just broke the host's mouth. And he motioned to me. I said, oh, is he going to give me a hard time? I can't believe this. And once he spat into his hand to make sure all his teeth were there. They were. And he said, I think I have a movie for you.
You don't recommend getting all your movie roles this way?
Or something like that. Yeah. It makes for a good story, but a lot of it, most of it is true. That's how we met. So after that, my life changed. Especially, he was unknowingly someone else I learned a great deal from.
I was surprised to read how complimentary your working is when you create a character for one of his films. It's not just, there's the script that was written and this is the character you're going to play. It's very different when you two work together.
It's true. There is usually it's just an idea. I get a phone call at some odd time asking me if I'm going to be in town. I said, well, yes, I'm in town now. How about in a couple? I don't know. One thing will lead to another. Eventually I'll get a script, and it's nothing. The character he has in mind, or the characters he has in mind, are really not well defined on the page. That's our job to do later on. We usually conflate 2 or 3 characters if it's an inconsequential role. We have one rule: whether that particular role will advance the film in some way. Of course, he's also somewhat superstitious, Garry. He likes a streak, you know. Our frame of references are the same. We're about the same age. You know, Joe DiMaggio's 56 consecutive game winning streak. We remember that very well. But he keeps the streak going. He makes sure of it. He's very loyal. And he knows how to, well, he doesn't so much shoot a film as throw a film. It's a party. As much as you can have fun on a film, Garry Marshall can do that.
All of your experience has always been good in this business, or are there some real rough
Oh,
moments?
no, you don't learn anything from good experiences only. You only learn from bad experiences. That's how you make adjustments. You know, when you sit in a car, when you learn to drive a clutch, the good thing is you learn how to drive a clutch. The car will teach you how to drive the clutch, you know, and you'll be doing this for 2 or 3 days. Oh, no, they've all been learning experiences. Fortunately, what I learned early on was to pay attention and to make sure that my failures were really, they were the great gift.
Yeah. Take me all the way back. W.C. Handy had something to do with the beginning of your career, correct?
You've done a lot of reading, young man.
I try to know my guests.
You've been wasting your life. Yes, that little knowing. Only after I met the gentleman, years later, I realized, wait a minute, that was W.C. Handy. And that's when my uncle, who was there during that moment, he said, yes, I think that was the name. And I followed the rest of the story down, and sure enough, I was a very young fellow. I was 10 years old. I was singing in a school play or a school production of some kind. It was the production of the season, and I was the school singer. I could sing, I think, before I could talk. As a matter of fact, for many years I thought my last name was Sing, because my father would just, if we were introduced to someone, he said, Hector, sing. That's it. So I thought that must be my name. I just opened my mouth and sing. It was easy. It was natural. It was fun. So I was having a good time up there, except that I was singing a song that was age inappropriate, shall we say. I was singing St. Louis Woman at the age of 10. St. Louis Woman did not particularly resonate with my age group. So, but I sang the song, and I sang it again. It was an encore. And then at the end of the assembly, which is what they're called, there we were in our little white shirts and black ties. It was a Thursday. I remember that they were always on Thursdays. And there in the back was my mother and my father, my overdressed uncle, and my sister. And they were standing with my nemesis, who was the schoolroom teacher, Mrs. O'Donoghue, my 6th grade teacher, whose mole I could swear was staring at me. I knew the mole hid some kind of secret device that could spy on me no matter where I was. But ironically enough, as it turned out, she wasn't that bad a cake, you know. She was the one who set up this appointment with a gentleman who had been in the audience. I later realized it was a diminutive, elderly black gentleman with dark glasses, being held rather daintily by a couple of people, one at each shoulder, at each elbow. And he said, son, something about music is God's gift to you, and you're using it as your gift to him, and so on. I had no idea what he was talking about. Some paraphrase like that. I nodded. Everybody was very tall. And some information was exchanged, and turns out it was W.C. Handy, who was the gentleman who had written that song, otherwise known as the father of the blues. And one thing led to another. I was in a rehearsal hall, however, shortly thereafter, and I was auditioning for early television. I was auditioning for the Okie Dokie Ranch House with Wendy Barry. And I was bounced on Wendy Barry's knee. A little singing, a little dancing was one shot, and that was it. From there, I segued to a boys' choir, the Frank Murray Boys' Choir. Did a lot of radio. There was no television to do radio, and a couple of operas. Whenever you needed boys' voices, young voices, you used the Frank Murray Boys' Choir, especially during the Christmas season. I did that for a while. It required my going to this new endeavor called rehearsals. Now, wanting to play one of the New York baseball teams since the time I could remember, this rehearsal didn't feed into that plan. One had to play ball. You go out after school, you play something, right? You run outside. Remember when kids ran outside and played after school? That's a long time ago.
Yeah.
They didn't come home and sit in front of whatever. They actually ran out and played. Got their knees skinned, and you had to figure things out and become a social animal. And that's what I wanted to do, not go to a rehearsal, for heaven's sake. And finally, I quit show business after a few weeks.
Where does dance fall into all this then? Then you did dance lessons.
Well, that's the years later. That was years. I was an adult, a young adult. In my early 20s, I had a drumming gig with a dance company. I was the conga player, and one thing led to another. One day, some dancer didn't show up. The choreographer had an idea for an adagio piece, or this bigger piece she was doing, this suite they were rehearsing for this dance company. this dance troupe might have better said. And she said, you move a lot. You're athletic, aren't you? I said, yeah. I was getting $10 for this gig. That's a lot of money back in 1958, 59. Huh? I said, yes. He said, so would you mind walking through this for me? I just want to see how I block it out. I'm going to audition dancer for this. By the way, there's no money involved. Little did I know. These are people who work very hard. Dancers are very serious athletes, athlete artists. All right, I'll do it for you, but you have to take your shoes off. Real men don't take their shoes off. I took my shoes off, rolled up my pants, and moved around. She said, you've got the job. So I lost my conga gig. I got a job doing this one shot, but that led to something else. That led to actually getting a scholarship to Ballet Arts Company of Carnegie Hall, not for ballet, but for the jazz segment. Mm-hmm. So I tried my hand at dancing for a while, and I immersed myself in that world for a very short time, I think about a year or so. And I was going to dance classes, and I realized this is not for me.
What do you think it is in you that has that need to perform? Because we talk, it's either singing, dancing, acting, music. What do you think it is?
It's interesting because I don't feel I have a need to perform. As a matter of fact, I'm a rather shy fellow. I'd rather not perform. Left to my own devices, I'd be Ferdinand the Bull. I'd sit under the yum-yum tree and just, read and have a flask of wine and watch the world go by and sniff flowers. If I did have a need to perform, it's when I was a very young man, especially music and theater. I was more comfortable, and I am more comfortable on stage than I am in front of a camera. But I never had a plan B. So to this day, I regret that very much. I would have gone possibly if I had more pressure, if something had been expected of me. Because the only thing that had been expected of me until then was to be a good citizen. And that's good enough. From my father's point of view, from his generation. Just be a good citizen, stand up straight, have good posture. My mother was just hoping that I would stay out of trouble. After all, I lived in a strong working class neighborhood. And be a little chubby, that's better, Be a little portly, that's successful looking. See, so all my goals were attainable. I never had the pressure of having to be, I could have had that, I needed that.
No stage parents, no pushing.
No, nothing like that. I didn't see my first play till my early 20s, quite frankly. Nothing like that. Until I started dancing. Then I started, tangentially rubbing against, coming in touch with the arts, people in the arts. But mostly in Greenwich Village. I first met dancers and poets and writers before I saw my first play, around the same time. And then I was intrigued by the theater. It also coalesced, I said, yeah, I can do this. Then I started studying. I took it very seriously.
And see, I have to
and
wonder,
on stage, I felt more alive than not.
But see, I wonder, coming out of a working class New York City family, parents, all that, and yet here's their son, interested in the arts, interested in performing. Did they get to see the success that it all led to for you?
They got to see me on stage.
Yeah.
My father, especially, he was quietly proud. He wasn't quite sure when I approached him with the fact that this is what I had decided to do with my life. This was my chosen profession, or perhaps it chose me. It seemed like it had chosen me, didn't it? A little knowing, right? The finger was already writing long ago. There's a Chinese proverb that comes to my mind. You often find your destiny on the path you take to avoid it. Mm-hmm. And that seemed to have happened to me. He wasn't quite sure what to make of that. He says, no, what is going to happen to this young man? I thought he was going to be a somebody at least a good citizen. But he's entering into areas I know nothing about, this business of the arts.
Right.
By the way, he was not a Neanderthal. Dad was a cultured man, but still there was that area. So he wasn't quite sure. When he saw that I was working hard at it, when he saw that it took great effort, when he saw it wasn't something frivolous, then it was all right. And then when he saw that I was making people feel good, I think he liked that. Although he never applauded it enthusiastically, at least not apparently so. I remember being on Broadway, and I was doing the lead in the Prisoner of Second Avenue, a Neil Simon comedy. Mm-hmm. He went to the opening night. He he absorbed that. My mother did also. She was a little confused by it all. She was always wondering when I would get a real job and wear a suit and and tie. She was hoping a job in the bank would be nice.
Yeah.
My dad was still not quite sure until he saw me on screen. But he did like the fact that people felt good. And he did come to see the play, but never told me. He would take his friends to see the play quietly, buy tickets, sit in the back, sit quiet. And I found that out later.
Yeah. Why do you think that was?
Well, he was from a certain time, and he had a certain personality. He always said, "Don't ever show off. It's bad.
Yeah.
It's bad. It's a bad breeding. It reflects badly on the family." Essentially, he would remind me, don't celebrate your triumphs and don't mourn your defeats.
Yeah.
There's a word in Spanish, it's a beautiful word, sereno, serene. Stay sereno. And he always pointed to Joe Louis. So you want to see serene? Watch Joe Louis. Makes it look easy.
Yeah.
Watch Joe DiMaggio play. So he related to that. And he loved music, but had a fine ear. He could have been a good violinist.
There was a point where your father ended up becoming a caregiver basically for your mom, who got sick. Could he keep the peace during all of that?
He tried. Yeah, that was his carapace, I found out. That was his exterior self. He tried very much. Didn't reach out for help during that time. Being a caregiver, and my mother was suffering from Alzheimer's at a time when it was the dark ages, the late 60s. She passed away in 1974. That was a challenge he wasn't prepared for, nor was anyone, I can't imagine, unless they've had professional training, which they have now. Back then, there was no word for Alzheimer's.
Did you even know what it was your mom was suffering with?
We didn't know. We weren't informed of that. It was pre-senile dementia, and we had no idea, that it was a progressive disease, that it would be getting much, much worse very slowly, and then the last stages would be precipitous and quite horrible. What I wasn't prepared for was the victim of that, which was my father, a very strapping, healthy man, and just dissolved into a shadow of himself.
Yeah. When your mom was starting to lose touch with what she had known, was she aware it was happening?
At some point she must have been, because, this we found out later, 3 or 4 of her sisters, possibly more people in her family, had suffered from the disease. They kept it very quiet. There was a bit of a stigma about it. So she must have related in some way to the fact that this has happened to 3 of my sisters, this thing that's happening to me that I don't quite understand. The frustration of that, the confusion of that, and the quiet desperation of knowing there's something going wrong, because she'd have these slight fits of distemper, disquiet fits of agitation. I've often thought of that. What was she going through? But again, a woman who didn't reach out. If we had today, we would have noticed the red flags right away in the early stages. The common ones, forgetting to put the roast in and having everything ready, but you forgot to turn the flame under the rice. The simple forgetfulness that we unfortunately now assume and attribute to natural aging. Well, it's best now not to assume that. Just have a test. It's a simple test. Sit down with a neurologist. They'll ask you a bunch of questions. And they'll say, yeah, you have a propensity for this. And you can prepare yourself and empower yourself and your group, your family group, and so you can make it a collective effort. That is very important. But none of that existed. There were no websites you can go to. There were no preventive anything. Yeah. So there was no respite for my father. It was 24/7. We tried to give him help, but he did that. He accepted help reluctantly. He wouldn't give himself downtime. It was his responsibility, his duty, a virtue in some cases. But when, as a doctor, a friend of mine said, when one person, don't make one tragedy 2 tragedies. Right. So ultimately, he made that 2 tragedies. And it was more than 2, because once I accepted the fact that my mother was not coming back, then we had to take care of my father. Yeah. And that took a toll on me, even though I was young, in my 30s, early 30s, and somewhat very resilient and strong.
I understand your dad kept thinking your mom was going to snap out of it, was going to get better.
Yes, in the beginning he was hoping that would do it. Being a religious man, he prayed a great deal, of course. At even one point, more often than once, he mentioned the fact that this is probably my fault. Not uncommon when you don't understand something. We had never sat down with a professional and have it all explained. This is this, and this is what will probably happen. You need help, and you need a support system. And eventually, she will have to be taken care of by professionals in a professional setting, a particular special Alzheimer's setting for Alzheimer patients. They're even scarce today. No, she was thrown in eventually with people she shouldn't have been in, psychiatric ward.
Yeah. You talk about your father and his dedication to it and not knowing the limits of what he could give. For you, young man, you've got a career, family, all of this going on. Inside yourself, how did you figure out how much to give and how much you had to preserve? And was there guilt that went along with that?
All good questions. Yes, there's guilt. Let's take it backwards. There was a lot of guilt associated with that, the fact that I couldn't do enough. I did what I could, and I stopped at one point and saved something for myself because I knew I was the head of a family group. Suddenly I became the elder.
Yeah.
I became the man of the group. And some part of me, in that fevered reptilian brain of mine, some part was trying to be responsible. So I would try to delegate, make sure my sister took some care, make sure that a friend of his would come by and give me a break. And because it was getting a little difficult at one point. At one point, the pressure got very, very great. I'd be visiting 2 hospitals in one day and doing a show at night.
Yeah.
And not just carrying a spear, but carrying the show. It was a very important, successful Neil Simon comedy, and you have to be on, at the top of your cream. So I wasn't. It was starting. My work was starting to suffer just a bit. The endurance factor was. I was hurting.
Yeah.
That's when I realized, I have to make an adjustment here. I can only help that up to a point. Now, if I were to articulate, I couldn't articulate that then. It's that sense that has helped me survive a couple of times in my life.
Yeah.
Just the sense. I trusted my nose, as it were. My heart told me, I have a son, I have a teenage son, I have responsibilities, I better take care of this.
Yeah. Looking back at all of that, how did that help shape you to who you are today, going through that experience?
Well, a smooth sea never made a skillful mariner.
Very true.
So I learned to navigate the waters a little better,
Yeah.
When people give me some of their woes and hard times, that ain't hard.
Yeah. So you do wonderful stage career. You start doing the films, great film work. Eventually, Chicago Hope comes along.
Oh, yes, though.
Are you surprised at, and I'm going to jump at this and hope that
Sure,
I get
go.
it right, the recognition factor that comes from weekly television as
It's
compared
stunning.
to everything else you did?
It's stunning. It's amazing. Something about being on that big screen, that's one thing. It's almost intimidating. You don't make the same connection, in a way, as you do on the small screen when you're in people's kitchens and people's bathrooms and people's bedrooms,
Yeah.
in every room in the house and people's playrooms, And you as viewer, take the liberty to interrupt what you're saying and go get a sandwich.
Yeah.
I'm going to get a sandwich now. But wait a minute, he's coming back just in time. What'd he say? You see? So it's that kind of sense of familiarity that breeds a sense of familiarity. It's an incredible, incredible influence, and I realize how important and powerful it is and how easily it can be manipulated. That's why it concerns me. It's a wonderful, powerful medium. But like any good samurai knows, a good sword stays in its scabbard. You have to know when to use that particular ability, and that comes from wisdom, and we're still trying to be wise. We're learning how to be a wise culture.
Yeah.
But that's a power. That's a power. That's almost like an oracle. That's when it gets dangerous, when it becomes the oracle.
Right.
When you don't say, just a second, I have a question about that. Just because it's a good image, but I have checked my facts. Ain't so.
Yeah.
Or it's more nuanced than that. That interaction, that's what I'm concerned about, the lack of it. But yes, I was stunned. Overnight, I became the quintessential doctor. I even had experiences where a laying of hands experience, quite frankly. It was shocking to me.
Yeah.
I was boarding a plane. I was in that tunnel, that purgatory section there, and some stewardess ran up to me and says, "A gentleman would you take some time? A gentleman in a wheelchair. His daughter would love for you to just speak to her father." I said, "Well, speak to her father?" She says, "Yes. And she read me the malady. It was a very general description. I said, "Very well." And I talked. There he was, and his hand was quavering and shaking. He shook it, and I said, and the daughter was there, and I just put my hand on his shoulder and talked to him, and I using my best bedside manner, and he started to cry, and he felt better. He says, "Thank you, I feel better." I said, okay, so that's what. Interesting. So that's why medicine is really an art form. What they should first teach doctors is please and thank you and knock before entering, which oftentimes they do not.
At this point, I have to say we are out of time. Thank you, Doctor, for taking the time to see us. Thank you so much for talking with us.
A pleasure. Thank
Hector
you.
Elizondo.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
To order a DVD of this or any episode of InnerVIEWS, please visit HoustonPBS.org.